Casual here. Thanks for joining me for this build guide for the Anomaly Technomancer that I run in the game. It would be a great help to me if you could smash the like button on this video. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm and getting my content out there. You can find plenty of Technomancer build guides, but almost all of them are pure weapon damage builds. I find this incredibly boring, and it really isn't what Outriders is all about. This isn't a pure looter shooter. It is more like World of Warcraft than it is Destiny, with abilities being its finest hour. So if you fancy playing a build that asks you to do more than just point your sights to the nearest warm body, that requires you to think and use your abilities on cooldown, while still doing great damage and having incredible survivability, then come on in, you found your new home. What you are looking at here is the build that pretty much every content creator is telling you that you should be using, and they're right. At the moment it's the best build for pure damage dealing, but to be frank, I think it's boring and lacks survivability. So let's wipe this one out of existence. The start of my build looks pretty similar to the weapon damage builds, taking those into the top tree. This is in order to pick up exposing toxin and mark for execution. These two are key to the build, as even after its nerf, vulnerability is a great damage buff to any build. There are a few things here though that are different. Firstly, whereas some weapon damage builds pick up suction module for more survivability, in this build you need to pick up Sorrow of Decay to reduce the cooldown of decay abilities. Secondly, weapon damage builds rely heavily, you could say even solely, on blighted rounds for damage. Blighted rounds deals anomaly damage which bypasses armour, and so armour piercing is irrelevant to those builds. For our build though, there is a mod that we'll be using that makes armour piercing vital. Stick with me to find out what that is. Finally, we will be picking up Toxicologist in the top tier to extend the duration of our toxic ticks, the main source of our damage. A 30% increase in its duration is a 30% damage buff, making toxic damage fatal. Well, that's the appetizer. Let's get into the meat and potatoes. The core of this build is focused on buffing your anomaly and status power as much as you possibly can, which will increase the damage of all status effects that you apply. On top of that, we want to pick up as much resistance piercing, toxic damage and duration as we can to further increase our anomaly based status effects. With our final 3 points, you do have some options. Wipeout is a nice execution buff, allowing you to eliminate those frustrating enemies that just refuse to die. Brain Freeze changes your melee skill to toxic, allowing you another way to apply dots. But personally, I prefer to pick up Team Player, which helps avoid a one-shot from elites, and a final DK Toxin to buff our toxic damage just a little bit more. With my final point, I pick up Adrenalizing Antenna, which with the skills we'll be running will be up pretty much all of the time, adding a very nice 30% anomaly power buff to us and any other players on the team. Speaking of skills, let's have a look at what I am running. Pretty standard here, with the 2 turrets, Blight and Frost, which provide additional damage, toxic application and crowd control. Blighted Rounds provides another source of toxic application, as well as good damage output. With the skill cooldowns I have, Blighted Turret's cooldown is a very low 6.1 seconds. Going back to Adrenalizing Antenna with its 10-second cooldown, and you can see that we have an easy way to keep this up 100% of the time. We have our cake with icing on top. So now all that is needed is the cherry on top, the gear and mods that make the build a gorgeous treat. To be fair, I am still trying to get the perfect pieces I want. I think there is enough here for you to see where I'm going. There are 3 things to look for in gear for this build. Anomaly power and status power both buff your status effects, improving your toxic damage, and so every piece of my armour has this. I've not quite settled on the 3rd stat, and need to do a bit more testing whether the long and close range damage buffs or the cooldown reduction provide the better damage boosts. The range damage buffs only impact on your weapon damage, which is not where most of your DPS is going to come from. Cooldown reduction means that blighted rounds will come back quicker, which is a damage boost in itself because of the gun I am running for it. The gun I am using when blighted rounds is up is the Earthborn LMG. The only epic weapon with 4 stats, but you could use any LMG that has armor piercing on it. I know what you're thinking, why armor piercing when blighted rounds bypasses armor? Well, it all comes down to one mod, Toxic Piercer. This increases toxic damage based on your armor piercing, and in this case it's a 40% buff, which is huge and makes picking armor piercing so powerful. The other thing with this gun is the tier 3 mod Fortress that I have on it, which came from the Death Shield shotgun. This mod increases all damage, whether it be weapon, anomaly, status, everything, by a whopping 43%, once your physical damage reduction is above 43%, which basically you will have unless you are playing naked. Hey, whatever floats your boat though. The other mod in this gun is Death Chains, which deals nearly 200,000 damage. If you don't have this one, then any damage dealing mod like Claymore or Storm Whip works well. Because I'm using this gun with blighted rounds, I don't need toxic bullets of any sort on it to apply my dots. When blighted rounds ends, I switch to my secondary gun, the legendary double gun Lucky Jinx, for its tier 3 mod, Ultimate Toxic Bullets, which applies toxic every second and keeps the dots going. The second mod on this gun is Ultimate Storm Whip, the tier 3 mod that you can get from the legendary assault rifle Thunderbird. You could of course use the tier 2 version of this, or Claymore, or many others. And if you don't have Lucky Jinx, something with improved toxic bullets would work nearly as well. Indeed, I'm looking for an LMG or assault rifle with armor piercing, status power and improved toxic bullets on it. I think they would provide better damage output than this legendary gun. Saying that though, this one does look freaking awesome, and I'm a sucker for such good looking gear. There are a few more mods that really make this build work. Radical Therapy buffs our damage against enemies afflicted by toxic by 15%. Because it says damage rather than specifying weapons damage, I think this includes the toxic ticks. Vein Ripper inflicts a secondary status effect with critical shots, bleed, increasing our dot damage even more. Toxic Lead and Vampiric Mag replenish our ammo on killing enemies with the toxic or bleed status effect, keeping blighted rounds up for longer and reducing our reload time. Bloody Boost increases your damage by 15% against enemies afflicted with bleed, similar to the toxic version. Captain Hunter, which you get from the legendary Gauntlets of the Cannonball, provides a great 25% boost to all damage against elites. Finally, I'm running 2 survivability mods in Emergency Stance, the Oh Shit Moment mod that gives you 65% damage mitigation for 4 seconds when your health drops to 30%, and Phantom Dash. This last one is not technically a survivability mod, but I can't put a price on being able to escape from a pack of alpha perforers who are stun locking you. The rest of the mods are up to you. In terms of my overall stats, the big thing to note here is the anomaly power, skill damage bonus and status power, which are very high. If I throw out a blighted turret, you can see the buff that Adrenalizing Antenna gives, taking my skill damage bonus to over 3000%. So that's the build. Let's have a look at it in action. Thanks for watching. I really hope you liked this build video and it's given you a few ideas to work with. Until next time, casual out.